We're good, right? Oh, there we go. Excellent. Welcome everyone to the City Council meeting of Centerville City being held on November 4th at 7 p.m. by Zoom. We're a day later than normal, just for the public's sake, so the public knows we're usually first and third Tuesday, but because of the election yesterday, we are holding it today. And we set this meeting time by resolution way back at the first of the year. So welcome. Before we start, I want to read a disclosure, and then we will get going after that. In accordance with Utah Code 52-4-2074 of the Utah Open and Public Meeting Act, I have determined that conducting an electronic meeting of the Centerville City Council with an anchor location presents a substantial risk to the health and safety of those who may be present at the anchor location. This determination is based on the facts and circumstances surrounding the COVID-19 pandemic. Considering the continued number of COVID-19 case counts in Utah, meeting in an anchor location presents substantial risk to the health and safety of those in attendance because physical distancing measures may be difficult to maintain at City Hall. Thank you. All right, let's, we can see everybody, but acknowledge when I say your name. Councilman McEwen.
Present.
Councilwoman Meekum.
Present.
Councilwoman Ivy.
Present.
Councilman Ince, I don't see him, but just in case he's going on our new name. And Councilwoman Fillmore. Councilwoman, so we have 3 of 5 present, so we do have a quorum to get going. Councilwoman Fillmore was going to join us. She was texted me and said to get started, and she'd be a few minutes late. So we have a quorum, and so we can move ahead. So let's start with the prayer thought from Councilwoman Ivy.
Thank you. Our Father in heaven, we are grateful to gather together this evening remotely to exercise our right to government for ourselves. Government of the people, by the people, and for the people. We're grateful for our founding fathers, for the freedoms that they presented to us that have been passed down over the generations. And we pray that as we consider various topics tonight, that we may also have the fire of liberty in our hearts, that we may make good choices, that we'll be able to continue to preserve and protect the freedoms and the opportunities that have made this country great for so long. We are grateful for the many, many people who protect us and who stand between us and danger. We ask thee to bless our first responders, our police and fire members who are willing to take that challenge and to protect us in times of danger. We're grateful for the many who work for the city and who make things run smoothly on a day-to-day basis. We're also so grateful for our citizens who make this place a wonderful place to live. We ask for thy blessing upon us this night. We ask for thy blessing upon our nation, that the turmoil may be subdued, that we may continue to live in a free and wonderful land and to enjoy each other's company and to be kind to those around us. We love thee. We thank thee for all that we have and pray for these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Councilwoman Ivy. We are all going to rise now, and I will say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And it looks like Councilman Ince is now joining us as well. So Welcome, Councilman.
Just like
First,
Tammy is here as well.
I'm
Oh.
here as well.
oh,
Hello.
wonderful. Sorry, Tammy. Welcome as well. The first item of business, excuse me, we have the open session. The open session is where members of the public can talk about anything that may be on their mind. You'll see on the screen, if you're not in on the Zoom call, how you can get in or how you can call in to express what might be on your mind. We ask you to keep it to a couple of minutes, and there's two other things on the public hearing tonight: a zoning text amendment regarding residential buffering regulations, and a general plan amendment on the transportation element, and also a fiscal year 2021 budget amendment. Those items will be a public hearing as well too. So if you have comments on those items, you can save them till we open those public hearings. But anything else, the floor is the public's for anything you'd like to express for a couple minutes.
Mayor, I am aware of one individual who did ask to speak in the public session and maybe having a problem with their phone. It's on there. It's Merrill Schiff.
Yeah, Merrill, can you get in? Thank you, Councilman. Saw him on the screen. Merrill, can you get in okay? Did you want to comment?
Yeah, can you hear me?
We got you. Thank you. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm pretty much computer illiterate, so I'm not sure. Yes, thank you for letting me take a little time. I appreciate the time that you folks put in every week. Lots of days. I know it takes a lot of time to do the things that you do. And you're really appreciated for the city. It just keeps the city ticking away. But my comment tonight, I'm sure most of you are familiar with it, is I'm talking about my father and mother and their gravesite at the cemetery. And they would like a raised headstone, and find out that now they can't have a raised headstone because of the policy that was passed a couple of years ago. So, these people have lived in Centerville for 70 years and have spent hours and hours donating time and 4th of July breakfast, whatever they, throughout the years, they've done a lot. They've owned businesses in the city and participated in a lot of city functions. And it just kind of feels a little bad that they can't. My father, 93-year-old father, was so excited to find these two grave sites when Mom passed away in March. And as he read the rules and regulations for the cemetery, he read to the point of that elevated headstones were acceptable. So he was pretty happy because he found these two plots that he really liked and could have headstones, but he quit reading then, and he didn't read far enough to know that there's some exemptions. So he was really disappointed when the monument people told him that he couldn't have, they didn't think that the city would let him have an elevated headstone. So he was very disappointed. So that's the purpose of my visit today, is these people have spent lots of time in the city, and it's not just them. There's plenty of people. I know you have a couple of people and a law enforcement officer that would like an elevated headstone, and other people I'm sure have the same desires that we have. But we just really feel like we're kind of, it's a pick and choose type of deal. And I know you didn't mean to do that, but their plots are right in an area where they have lots of friends and neighbors that have passed on, and they they have elevated headstones. And if you bought your site after, I think it's 2018, you can't have an elevated headstone, but somebody right next to us that bought theirs earlier can still have an elevated headstone. So I'm kind of asking to petition the council to have a public hearing on this. I know the last, when it was passed before it, you didn't have a public hearing, and this is pretty important for the citizens of Centerville, because every man, woman, and child who is buried in the cemetery should have some last rites, you would think. And I think it's pretty important. Now, I know you have sections of your cemetery that are set aside for flat headstones only. And I can understand that. And I know the purpose for the flat headstones. And where across the street it's a flat headstone area, we understand that. But where we are on the, and I don't really remember which section, but it's right by the flagpole, all the friends and neighbors around us have elevated headstones. You kind of just feel like we're picking and choosing. So I'd like to petition the council to revisit this and see if we can get some public input on it and public hearing, and see if the citizens of Centerville really are okay with that.
Thanks, Merrill. And Merrill, I know that you and I tried to talk yesterday, and it didn't work with our schedules. We, a few weeks ago, in a work session, were going to discuss the cemetery further, and it was cut short because of the discussion before that going long. I know this is on the council's mind heavily, the direction that we go with the cemetery. So we need to revisit that from when we got cut short the other day, as far as just not with the headstones, but where we are going with the cemetery. So we appreciate you sharing your concern, and we will take that under advisement and see if we can't get that back on agenda. I have your number where we could let you know when that happens. So thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for your time.
Do we have any others on the for the open session?
I would like to get that on the agenda as soon as possible, where we have a couple of graves that are waiting to do their headstones. I think we need to make a decision one way or the other.
I'd second that.
Well, I think we have a complexity there, though, which is we put this policy in because we're reclaiming sites, right? That's part of it, is the equipment.
We're not finding any sites.
We're not.
We don't have any graves left up there.
So are we done reclaiming sites? I mean, I'm not saying one hinges on the other, but.
Yeah, this was part of that discussion. I think we can't remember what else we had on the agenda that night, and we didn't get back to it about a month ago. But Councilman McEwen's right. I mean, that's a big reason why it was done, to reclaim sites. But if we're not reclaiming sites, then you can revisit potentially the raised headstones.
Yep.
So we got sounds like we have council members that would love to see it back on the agenda. And like I said, we did in a work session not get to it. So we'll get that scheduled next meeting.
That sounds great. Thank you, Mayor.
Thanks. All right, any more on the open session? I don't believe so. So we'll close this.
Well, I'd like to say something.
Thank you.
I can't figure out how to raise my hand.
Well, you're good because you said something. I can hear you. So
Oh, good.
give us your name and where you're from.
Oh, this is Mary Brown.
Great, Mary.
I live over by I live at 2030 North, 725 West. over by the DeVore property.
Okay,
Um, uh, I would just like something to say about the density of the property that Symphony wants to put in there. I know that some of you might have seen the picture of Carrie Smith, and she's holding out her arms in between some homes that were built over by the old, the property clear south.
over on
In
Pages
Centerville.
Lane, yes.
Market.
Where
Yes,
the old Dick's
in
was, yeah.
Pages Lane.
Uh-huh.
And those are awfully close. But I just wanted to mention that my son lives down in, Kelly, where is it? North Salt Lake, Foxborough. Thank you. And those houses are close, but 2 years ago, there was a fire down there. And because the houses are so close, the one fire at the house destroyed 4 other, damaged 4 other homes. 2 of them were next to the homes, and the others were just in the backyards close to. But because of the heat, did a lot of damage to the other homes. So I'm objecting to the homes that Symphony is building, having them so close to each other, such a density that I would like to see the lots bigger. They present too much of a fire hazard with them being that close. If anything, a barbecue or anything were to happen, it would cause a lot of damage to the other properties.
Thanks,
And
Mary.
that's all I'd like to say.
Thank you. So 2 weeks ago, we had a big, long public hearing on this, and you probably are aware of that.
Yes.
And it went back to the drawing board with Symphony Homes, and it will come up at another meeting, possibly our next meeting. And
Yes.
some of the concerns, or all of the concerns of the residents were discussed. So they have gone back to the drawing board, Symphony Homes, with it being a PDO, and they will be coming back to us with the changes that they've made. So we will see what they come back with.
Mayor, if I
Thank
could
you.
make a comment while Mary's still on the line. Technically, these comments are not part of the record for the Symphony Homes project. So you will want to keep track of when that is next scheduled on an agenda and actually make your comments or provide some sort of email comment so that it can be part of that record. We do have a public hearing process with an applicant-driven application. So you really need to make those comments as part of that as well.
Thank you, Lisa. That's our city attorney, Mary. What she's basically saying is when it comes up on the agenda in 2 weeks or 4 weeks, whenever it may be, that's kind of when Symphony Homes is ready, that with these comments on a public hearing, we have these on the record in an open session, but like Lisa's saying, that for the public hearing relating directly to the matter is when they get documented. So, but we have them in our mind, so thank you. Any other comments? I'm looking, I don't see any hands raised. So if not,
Can I make a comment, Mayor?
oh, sure.
I would like to ask that next time that Symphony is presenting on that issue, that we ask Chief Bassett for a summary of the fire that Mrs. Brown just told us about, what happened, and his comments on the spacing.
Okay, we could do that. It will probably be the interim chief, because I don't know if everyone knows, but Chief Bassett is retiring November 12th. So, but
I did not know that.
We could get the interim chief in.
That's our loss.
Yeah. So, okay. Thank you. The interim chief is Dane Stone. Probably many of you know Dane, but we could get Dane in. Okay. Seeing no further comments, then we'll move on from the open session. The first item of business on the meeting tonight is a public hearing. It's a zoning text amendment, and this is one that let me get to my screen that I have it on. Corey, do you want to address it, or is there someone else?
You might want to choose someone else. Get tired of hearing from me.
Isn't that why you're here, though?
It is why I'm here.
Okay.
So just a summary, this is a zone text amendment. It was initiated by the city council. If you recall, there were some discussions on a previous project in Centerville. We brought up the issue of buffering. The council gave a directive to the planning commission and staff to study residential buffering. And he also mentioned that maybe it could be in conjunction with the South Main Street plan. However, the planning commission feels that while we're in this COVID Zoom meeting process, they're a little hesitant to open up the South Main Street plan without the adequate public participation, or some version to create adequate public participation. So they set this as a goal. They felt they could, at staff suggestions, address it fairly quickly, separate from that expectation. So you'll have to decide whether this meets the muster of what you directed us to do. Just so you know, the Planning Commission did somewhat at length discuss residential buffering. They looked at commercial buffering and how that is utilized, compared it to what they might do with the different zones on residential areas. There was some discussion for people to understand the difference between buffer depths versus setbacks. And although they seem similar in measuring distances, setbacks are to individual structures in a base zone. Buffering is distances and spacing between different types of zones. After a couple of meetings and discussions, the Planning Commission made 2 directives to staff. One of them was to keep it simple, and the other one was to create an opportunity that if there's a unique situation, somebody could request a relief from that standard. And so what you see before you is the text amendment in its simplistic form, and the out is already existing in our ordinance in this very chapter that they're amending it. We call the out a waiver of strict compliance, and there are standards for the commission to review to waive the landscaping standards. So you do not see amendments for the out because they feel that tool exists. So what you're seeing is the text amendments to buffering. And the best way I could describe it is they chose degrees of separation. So if you're thinking of Kevin Bacon, we are in degrees of 2. They feel that to make a complex change in all the types of various residential zones was not necessary. And in that discussion, they felt it needed to have a 2 degrees separation. And so they were concerned about high density residential zones adjacent to low density residential zones. So the text amendment you see fixes the the language to include both non-residential development, which is our commercial industrial development, which already exists. Buffering already exists for those uses, but we edit the language to create the distinction. We add in language for residential buffering with one category, and that is any residential high zone against a low zone will have a buffer of 25 feet. Be aware that in both of those zones, the setbacks is 20 feet for a rear yard. So this is 5 additional feet. And this would cover residential high to residential low and residential high to agricultural low. And that's their simple form that they're recommending to you.
Sorry, I was muted. Thanks, Corey. Any question for Corey before I open this up for public hearing?
Corey, that 25 feet between zones is all on one property, all on the high intensity property, correct? You're
muted.
Yes, the obligation is for the higher intensity zone to buffer itself against the lower intensity zone.
okay. Thank you.
And other questions? We'll come back to more questions after the public hearing then. So this is a public hearing matter, as I mentioned. So the public hearing for the zoning text amendment to residential buffering regulations, ordinance number 2020-11, which Corey just talked about, is now open. You'll see on the screen how you can dial in the meeting ID, the passcode. I'll give it a few minutes in case those are struggling to get in, and I'll pull up and look at hands that might be raised as well too. So the public hearing is on this matter is now open. I don't see any hands going up, or I haven't been informed that anybody has called in. So we will close the public hearing and we'll come back to any further questions for Corey and or discussion.
So I have a question. Well, I have a couple of comments and questions. I guess I feel like if we're going high density to low density, I might feel better about 30 feet, where it's 20 feet if it's just a low density to a low density home. So I'm not sure that I feel like 5 extra feet is going to be enough if you're going to be going from residential low homes to a high density, obviously complex. I think I would rather see that to be 30 feet so that it was a little more, away from the homes. I think, like I said, that's only 25 feet is only 5 feet more than what a single family home would have to have. And then up here in the medium density zone, which is, so is that where it says medium density zones 15 feet? Is that all commercial, Corey, that you're talking about?
Yeah, any commercial already has a 15-foot buffer in the commercial medium.
And that's between a commercial and a commercial?
No, that's between a commercial and a residential.
Oh, so I would rather see that one go to 20 or 25.
I guess the question becomes, Corey, how close to the property line can the business be?
From commercial to commercial on a side and rear, it can be on a 0 lot line.
0?
0 from commercial to commercial. Commercial to residential, it depends on what type of zone. And those languages have already exist, so we have not noticed to change the commercial language.
Well, but I get, I'm trying to understand Robin's comment. When she makes the comment that you've already got 10 feet or 20 feet in between two homes, I think that's actually not quite necessarily correct. You're going to have 16 to 20 feet because each home has a 10 and an 8, right? And you could have two 10s next to each other or two 8s next to each other. So you've got either 16, 18, or 20. Am I right?
I think you're confusing setbacks versus buffer. This is the same discussion at the Planning Commission. Setbacks are in the base zone and they separate structures within that base zone.
I understand, but the two work to the same end.
No,
Robin's
they don't.
comment.
They don't
Robin's
work to the
comment
same
was.
end.
Well, Robin's comment was. Give me half a second.
Okay.
Two homes, 20 feet, and she's saying 25 feet isn't enough because it's only 5 feet more. And my comment would be, I'm not totally sure that I disagree. I just want to make sure I understand. If you've got a commercial next to a residential, what did you say the property line spacing is on the commercial?
It depends on what type of commercial. So from a commercial medium to a residential zone, it's 15 feet.
Okay,
From a
so
commercial high and very high, it's 30 feet.
okay, so if you take the medium and it's 15 feet, then the home has a setback on the property of another either 8 or 10, depending on which side they take it on. So you're effectively 23 to 25 feet. Am I missing something?
A little bit. Think of a commercial zone having a rear yard and a residential having a rear yard. The commercial would be automatically 15 feet because it typically has a 0-foot setback to the rear yard. So they have to substitute that 0-foot setback and move it to 15 feet because they are required to put in a 15-foot buffer to everything, not just the building, it's also to the parking. And then the rear yard of the home would have 20 feet. And so now you have 35 feet between the structures.
But if you were just building two homes, you'd have 40 feet. So if you had two residential low homes with their backyards together, there would have to be 40 feet between those two homes. But we're
Right,
saying,
but what I'm trying to keep you from is we did not advertise a discussion on the commercial setbacks.
I'm not talking about commercial.
Yeah, so the issue that we're focusing on is between two adjacent residential differing zones.
Right. So what I'm saying, okay, I build my house and I have a 20-foot backyard.
Okay.
And the piece of property next to me comes in and builds a large apartment complex.
They have to have a 25-foot.
They only have to have a 25-foot. So that's only 5 foot more than if that had been a single family home.
Correct. So now you have 45 feet.
So you would have 40 if it was just two homes.
Correct.
So now we have 45. So I probably feel better about adding another 5 to, because we're not even looking at medium density, we're looking at high density. So I feel like if I have a home, I have my 20-foot backyard, somebody else builds another home, I would have another 20-foot backyard. So I have 40 feet between the houses.
Yeah,
but now instead of building a single family home, they're going to build an apartment complex and they only have 5 more feet than a single family home. I would personally rather have that to be 10 feet.
Right, but here's something, I mean, the distance value is up to you whether you want it 25 or 30 feet. But if you remember the discussion that we had, in the case of what they were building in that subject property that created this example, they had a side yard to a rear yard. And the side yard was 8 feet to a rear yard of 20 feet. So you had 28 feet. So at this point in time, it doesn't matter whether there's low density has an 8-foot setback, a 20-foot setback, a 10-foot setback. The obligation now is an automatic 25. So you could have a home closer than the 25 or the 30 simply by having a side yard setback of 8. So what we're trying to focus on is just.
It would only be 33 feet.
What's that?
If it
It's
was a
also,
side yard, it might only be 33 feet.
Correct, if it's to a side yard.
it's also requiring an architectural buffer, right?
Yeah, the 25-foot setback is not just to a building. It's to any building, any parking. In between those buildings and parking, that 25-foot has to have a tree every 25 feet linear down the buffer. It has to have a 6-foot architectural wall or planting wall along the property boundary line.
Yeah.
Then you have the additional 25 feet.
So it's going to be very, very buffered the way this is written. I think the concern with that situation that led to this is the height difference in looking into the backyards, right? But it's tricky for us to try to control for that, because then you'd be creating buffers that were just, you know, outrageously too large to create something that really is going to be near impossible to control. And especially when you're considering that in that situation, I think we were talking about 30 feet in height for what was proposed, and any single family home can be built at 30 feet in height. So when we try to get in and control for every possible situation, then we end up writing some bad ordinance.
Yeah, just remember the 25 feet was the suggestion of the council at the directive. But if you want to bump it 5 more feet, you have the legislative discretion to do so.
So, Councilman Eds, Councilman Meekum, between Councilman Fillmore and Corey, did you get clarification, get your question answered there?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Any further questions for Corey or discussion? If not, I'd look for a motion on this ordinance.
So I'm close, but let me. I guess I'm assuming that Tammy has spoken. Stephanie and George, no feelings on this?
Well, I have feelings on it. I'd rather see it add another 5 feet, personally. Just the number of people, the number of buildings, it just feels more intense, even though it's a little farther away. I'd like to have that just 5 more feet farther would make it feel better to me.
So my thought there is on the 5-foot difference is, what does that do to existing parcels? That we just made some of these parcels that would be impacted less usable or less marketable?
Probably.
And does it make a big enough difference for that negative consequence to what we're trying to do? Right. I mean, I agree with the idea, and I'm glad this came back to us and the amendments are here in front of us, because I think they're an improvement. But the further we push it, it's kind of arbitrary, I think, unless we go 60, right? But then we're just making the pieces of land that are left in our city unusable. So even the 5 feet might put a piece of property in a situation where it's not really able to be designed as well as it could be, and we haven't gained that much in the 5 feet. So since this is the directive that the council gave to the planning commission, and I do think they did a really good job with what they were directed to do. It's simple, it's concise, it does give a good buffer. And remember, this is the landscaping buffer. So like what Corey said, if it's then a building or a parking lot or anything else, this is all landscaping. So it can't be something else besides that. And then there's the additional architectural buffer of at least 6 feet tall to create more feeling of separation and buffering there. So I feel really good about what the Planning Commission's done here, and I like us to be able to support the Planning Commission when we can, since there's so many times we change what they give us, and they gave us what we asked for. So I would make a motion that we approve Ordinance 2020-11, amending section 12.51.070 of zoning code, establishing buffer requirements between differing types of residential zoning districts.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
I'll second that for discussion.
A second. Motion by Councilwoman Fillmore, second by Councilman McEwen. Further discussion?
Corey, is Corey, you still there? I haven't gone back to the notes of the meeting where we sent this to the Planning Commission. Did we talk specifically, I'm trying to remember, did we talk specifically about doing something different for a multi-story development adjacent to residential versus a single story adjacent?
No, that wasn't part of the directive to look
Oh,
at.
okay, but did we talk about it? I seem to remember we talked about it and you tried to talk us out of it, and I'm trying to remember if that's correct.
Yeah, well, the low zone allows a home to be 35 feet. A high zone allows it to be 35 feet. And so in the brief discussion, I just said it's really a moot point at that level.
The discussion did occur, but it wasn't pertaining to this particular discussion in terms of sending it to Planning Commission for consideration. But we did discuss it, the importance of that, but not pertaining to this exact item. I just wanted to share, in terms of we're going to be looking at the moderate income housing report. We're talking about multifamily. We have a state that's watching everything we're approving in terms of multifamily, and if we're encouraging it by adding 5 feet, it to make it even 30. Just keep in mind the state is watching us, and it seems somewhat arbitrary in a way, but I get the concern. But I do recall the conversation at that council meeting. There was a discussion of pushing it back even further. But if I recall correctly, there was, what's the point of another 5 feet? But also there was an undue burden on the developer, and what would that create? Particularly in the scenario that we were discussed, it would have made this project potentially undevelopable if there was a 30-foot buffer. So just wanted to add that.
I feel that the ordinance we're looking at, in my personal opinion, that it accomplishes the objectives we're looking for, and especially with the aspect of parcels and planning that's already taken place, that it allows those parcels to be used. So
And I'm okay with that. I just wanted the discussion so that we had looked at, that make sure that this was what we wanted.
I appreciate that, Councilwoman. If there's is any further discussion? If not, let's vote on it then. Councilwoman Fillmore.
Aye.
Councilman Ince.
Aye.
Councilman McEwen.
Aye.
Councilwoman Ivy.
Aye.
And Councilwoman Meekum.
Aye.
Thank you. That motion passes 5-0. All right, let's do to the second item on our agenda. This is another public hearing matter. This is general plan amendments on the transportation element. Corey, are you presenting on this, or do we have somebody else that's going to? This is coming from Planning Commission as well.
Yes, correct. I'm just going to make sure we got the right ordinance. So I put up on your screen the staff report that, the Planning Commission recommendation report and scrolled down to the findings just above their vote. Just trying to quickly orient you on what's happening here. I know a few of you attended the 4 o'clock to 6 o'clock meeting with Wasatch Front Regional Council, and they talked about the new general plan requirements that are driven out of Senate Bill 34 from over a year ago. We had to update our moderate income housing plan to comply. We did that last November, and we're able to submit that along with the annual report. This year, it was the intent from our training that the cities were to report on their efforts in Senate Bill 34 with coordinating their transportation plan. And you see that it is quite a lengthy language on what you have to do, but there are options for the city to look at as you coordinate your transportation plan with your inside your general plan. So by way of backing up so that you somewhat feel comfortable, hopefully, with where we're at this point on our transportation plan, we're required to look at our moderate income housing plan and our land use elements, and we're to coordinate our land use elements with a transportation plan. Land use elements not defined. Land use element can be a lot of broad things. We could talk about trails, we could talk about zoning. Typically, land use element talks about future growth in the city and what's happening. So the Planning Commission and the staff looked at our general plan, and that's why I'm coming to these findings. Is one of the findings on C is we're tying our housing elements. These findings here are the kind of the purpose of some of the amendments of coordinating the transportation plan. And so you see 4 bullet points there. It talks about the city is not going to discriminate against racial, ethnic, religious, or economic discrimination. I think that economic discrimination is something that, now these are existing policies in the plan, just so you know, these are not new policies. Economic discrimination is a housing concern, and it also ties to the moderate income housing plan that the city is supposed to look at and report on each year. We're also to look at assure an adequate supply of housing for the future population, and then identify those optimum locations for housing development. And we've done that with our neighborhood plans and some of our zoning is where we plan where our density is going to go. We've built out a lot of the density. We have a remaining north area probably to develop, and it's centered around a single family up at the north end. So at this point in time, that's the expectation of the north end of the city. We also have a desire in our housing element, existing housing element, to provide a variety of housing options within a community, including variable densities. I think we do that. People may disagree with maybe how we approach it, but if you look at the various neighborhood plans, we talk about distances from Main Street, the distances from Parish Lane, where we're going to place multifamily within a 1/4 mile walk of Parish Lane, or 1/2 mile distance from Parish Lane, or transportation areas. Like we do that already. And in furtherance of these goals that are listed above, we want to provide appropriate housing for all Centerville residents, considering ongoing lifestyle changes, circumstances that are increasingly prevalent in the normal life cycle of the aging residents. Now, what's interesting is that this was policy adopted in the 80s. This is not policy. This is not very recent policy. This is a policy adopted in the 80s. So my point is, what we were discussing in the 80s, we're discussing in the 90s, and we're discussing them in the 2000s, and now we're discussing them in the 2020s. It doesn't go away. I guess that's the message. So we're coordinating with our general plan, this transportation element, but we're taking a little more zero focus, a microscopic look at our moderate income housing plan. Our transportation element is to be looked at, and it's really this whole effort is a subcategory of Senate Bill 34, doing our moderate income housing planning. And so I've left it at that simple level. In order to comply with Senate Bill 34, funding for a holistic general plan change, COVID-19, I felt like this year we needed to accomplish two things with Senate Bill 34. One, coordinate a little bit better, particularly with a laser focus on moderate income housing, so that we can show that we're making some headway in our moderate income housing effort. Because we have to report every year our efforts that we're making. If they're small or whether they're large, it doesn't matter. We just have to report our effort. And so I thought I would kill both of those options for 2020, get something that better complies with Senate Bill 34 in the transportation, and do something that begins to look towards implementing our moderate income housing plan. So go to finding D. Finding D in the recommendation from the Planning Commission. These are your 3 top goals in your moderate income housing plan. We have a couple of more under the any other program or strategy. We add, I think, 3 or 4 more strategies under that heading, and we're addressing one of them in these amendments. So here's our top 3 goals that we committed to in our plan. Create or allow for and reduce regulations related to accessory dwelling units in residential zones. And you're well aware of conversations about building codes, Utah League of Cities and Towns and their efforts. But we also need to look towards how we're going to look at accessory dwelling units. And so we've capitalized on this transportation element to maybe do that. If you recall, way back in the discussions is, well, where do we start? Do we just do it citywide? It could hurt a neighborhood if we do it just citywide. Do we pick just a geographic area and favor one geographic area over another? And we had very much unanswered questions at that previous discussion in, what is it, nearly 2 years ago. So we're going to add to that and try to consider something about allowing ADUs. Another goal is to preserve existing moderate income housing. You'll see later in the report, we do use our RDA monies in the past. We've helped Pheasant Brook and Cedar Springs in the past with RDA money, and we should be monitoring our tax increments from those redevelopment areas and redistributing the required percentages towards moderate income housing preservation. As you well know, we've had some moderate income housing maybe transitioning away, so that just makes that task even more important. And then the third one's any other program. So we've added something on the any other program. So let's scroll back up to the commission's amendments. So we're going to add a new section. I reserved a section for alternative transportation planning. We already do alternative transportation planning, but we probably ought to move it. We have a bicycle and trails map and facility under community facilities in our parks element. And so we do coordinate our bicycle and our trails already, but at some point in time, we probably ought to transfer that out of parks and recreation in the general plan and move it into our alternative transportation. What we haven't done is the city participated in that study, that joint study with Bountiful and others on an alternative transportation planning. They've completed that document last fall, and we need to go through that document and see what those recommendations are and probably add to our transportation plan some of those results, and then we can reformat the pedestrian or the trails and the bikes as part of that, but not this year. So we add this new section, coordinating it. And
Corey, I want to let you finish, but before I forget, I'm just wondering if it would be possible and appropriate, rather than transferring that plan from the parks to this area, can we just duplicate it and have it in both?
Yeah, we can make that policy decision later.
Okay.
Yeah, no problem. We can decide how we format it. Just the more you copy and paste, the more edits and notices you have to make every time you change it. But if that's what you'd like to do, no problem. So let's go on to what we have. We have 2 goals, roughly. So goal one is to look for moderate income housing placement opportunities based on their proximity to various collector and arterial corridors. So policy 1A, here's what we're doing with ADUs in our transportation corridors. We're saying as we develop and adopt provisions and strategies for allowance of ADUs, so we're not there yet. We still have to work out ADUs, how they'll work in the city and if they'll work in the city. But if that's our goal, we're gonna, once we get to that point, we're gonna now look at the corridors for the first potential placement of ADUs. And the idea is that these transportation corridors are where the heavier traffic is. And so we have opportunities where a home might be fronting a road, experiencing a lot of traffic. They might benefit from adding an ADU and improve the value of the property. And then we also say, or a property that is substantially within the 300 feet of a transportation corridor. And this is the concept that you look at Ron Randall's home, very narrow, over an acre, one home on it, not really able to do much else with the property. It's way underutilized because he decided to keep his horses and all the subdivisions built around him. And now he is cornered in ability to use that property. So maybe that property could have an ADU as an example. And policy 1B is that these owner-occupied accessory dwelling units would be encouraged in the corridors listed. So I think what's important for you to think about in this is, are those corridors listed okay with you? The Planning Commission picked these corridors and the transit routes mimic the corridors listed with our current bus service. Policy 1C, this was a discussion that grew out of a previous work meeting with the council on South Main Street. And the idea that, okay, we'd maybe do not want the number of units currently allowed in the South Main Street area, but we wouldn't mind some accessory apartments. And so this one is saying, hey, here's the two corridors that accessory apartments could be used on. One, South Main Street corridor, and added late into the discussion was South Frontage Road from the Renegade Sports to the South City limits. Maybe that commercial area, particularly on the southern end, could benefit from a little bit of commercial and some accessory apartments. So talk about those two corridors for accessory apartments. Goal 2, if I can take you, some of you, way back to the infill brief. Some of you, I think, were on the council. We discussed infill in the city, and we had flag lots, and we know how the resulting flag lot idea warranted or merited out. We had discussion of inclusionary zoning. This is the idea of subsidized housing or some nature where we incentivize inclusionary zoning on economic disparities. But one of them that came up was a flexible lot overlay. And so if I'll take you back to the flexible lot overlay, let's say we have a large parcel with a home and the home is somewhat centered. So if you remember the Grazie rezone, just a few weeks, maybe a couple of months ago, was on Main Street. What was it, 1825, 1785, something like that, on the west side. Had an existing home. They came in, rezoned it from agricultural low to residential low. And the home occupies a majority of that frontage. And so the next frontage was just enough to create a 60-foot lot width to get two lots that they want to come in eventually and divide on that property. But we have experienced in the past where some lots make these larger properties a little difficult to develop because they have 120 feet of frontage, but the existing home occupies 80 feet of it. And so now you can't get a 60-foot wide lot. So a flexible lot overlay is the idea that we can adjust lot frontages in small percentages, or we can adjust setbacks in small amounts, not as aggressive as a flag lot. That was one thing the Planning Commission focused on, is can this be interpreted so aggressively it would become a flag lot? No, because a flag lot is defined as a certain X parameter. This would be a parameter much more restrictive than a flag lot, but a little less restrictive than the lot widths and of the base zone. And so we can capitalize under those flexible lot overlay and add some housing stock to the underutilized properties. And the corridors to discuss are the same corridors that accessory dwelling units could be put on. Because not everybody in our mind is going to do an accessory dwelling unit or deal with the headaches of accessory dwelling unit, particularly if their accessory dwelling unit remains in the current format that it has to be a part of your main home. I think that will discourage some accessory apartments. But
I have a question right
we
here.
could use underutilized parcels instead of accessory dwelling units and still add a housing unit to the city. So that's basically the arguments. I'll take your question.
Okay, so I have a question. So I own this piece of property and it's 120, but my house is taking 80. So we're going to let another house be built next to me. Would that be still part of my property, more like an ADU, or would I be able to sell that as a separate building lot, more like a flag lot?
You would be able to sell it under a flexible lot. What you're talking about is called a group dwelling, where you allow multiple dwelling units on one single parcel. A flexible lot is a subdivision lot where there's one underutilized property, has some minor constraints because of the home or something, and we reduce the lot width to 50 feet instead of 60 feet and allow you to divide and do additional home.
Okay, and then I have another comment on the transportation end of this. I was, of course, you know me, I was a little concerned that we were opening ourselves up so that if we get bus rapid down our main street, then they're going to come in and want us to build our density around a stop or anything. But after listening to that meeting tonight, it actually made me feel better, because I thought if we were to have bus rapid or something else, we really need it on the other side of the freeway, where we have actually decided to put our density. So instead of building bus rapid and then trying to build around it, we need to put bus rapid where we've already chose to put our density, because those are the people that need it. So I was a little excited about that. When I heard that in the meeting, I thought, yes, that's validating what I think everybody in our city feels like, is they don't really want all of that down our main street, but it would be great over there where all those apartments are, because if somebody rides the bus, that's where it's going to be. So I was excited about that.
Yeah, they discussed that during establishing centers. And I think that's part of the issue that you have to debate as a legislative body, is how do you want to participate in the dialogue, particularly around bus rapid transit? Because they do have to do, to some extent, some feasibility studies and look at some routes. And maybe that's your discussion as you participate in bus rapid transit, that you would prefer an alternative that takes it to a different place than Main Street. The only caution that we talked about previously, Councilmember Meekum, is that UDOT owns the corridor of Main Street, and the Wasatch Front Regional Council coordinates the transportation with them. So that's the likely corridor, unless we can come up with data and information that supports an adjustment to that corridor.
And this speaks exactly to the last meeting that we had with Trustee Holbrook, is that she asked us to participate in that discussion and to pay our portion of the environmental study so that we could be a voice at the table, and this council refused that invitation. So that's part of the challenge, is that we want to be part of that discussion so we can throw all these ideas and preferences on the table.
But the discussion was, you're going to pay for a feasibility study for your Main Street. It wasn't you're going to pay for a feasibility study that allows you an alternate. So I think we got to be careful and say we didn't want to seat at the table, but I don't want to pay somebody to study something that's not advantageous to the city.
But we had not yet drawn on the map what the ending at 500 South going north route would be, and that was the process of getting it on the map for the feasibility study. So
pay to play doesn't work for me. If they wanted us to go the other route, if you said your money will be used to allow you to help pick your route, that's great. But the dialogue before that was pretty public that we're going to punch a hole straight down your Main Street straight to Farmington.
Yep.
And now that likely will still happen without us even being there to suggest or ask about the possibilities of zigzagging it and moving it a different way. So
we did suggest and ask. That was definitely part of the discussion last time.
Right, but I'm saying it's a long, drawn out, involved process that if we're a stakeholder, if we're part of that and really seriously at the table. So just what we've already been through.
No, I hear what you're saying. I just don't like being a stakeholder when it's let me borrow your money to do something that your constituents do not want, and then turn around and use that as the reason why we can't have what they're going to do is because we didn't pay them to play. I don't know.
Okay, we can go back and forth on this all night, but it's not mapped. The northern portion isn't mapped out yet because it doesn't exist on a map, and that would be the reason that we were invited to the table, is to help finalize the map. So anyway, I have another question, but I don't want to jump ahead if Robin's still talking about what she was talking about.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay. So Corey, I'll just be honest, this really surprises me. In my mind, the ADU goal is very different from the increasing moderate income housing opportunities around transit stops goal. And so it very much surprises me that the ADUs got tied to the transit corridors. I definitely envisioned the ADUs being a citywide option, and that then along transit or major transportation corridors, we would be looking at things like the flexible lot zoning and other additional options, even maybe some medium density zones. So by picking ADUs and one or two other things that were definitely on the more minimal side of the way to contribute to this solution, these solutions that are being asked for, we were already on the very minimal side. And then by reducing the ADU solution in such an extreme way to only the transportation corridors, puts us on the minimal side.
It reduces it. It's where you begin.
Okay. Well, I wonder if we'll run into. I wonder if we'll run into public challenges with that, because from what I've heard, I've put a little bit of feelers out in the community about ADUs, and I've heard very, very positive feedback, and a lot of people interested in seeing that option for their home. And so,
how do you feel that starting with the transportation corridors as the first foray into ADUs somehow takes away the opportunity to broaden the use?
I would just probably start broad. I would just say, if we're saying this is an appropriate use for a single family home, we know that not everyone's going to take advantage of it. We have data on the percentages of people who take advantage of it, and to not have it be citywide. So to say, if you have a single family home and we determine that this is an acceptable use, then it just really, it just very much surprised me. I never would have even thought to limit ADUs to transportation corridors when I think.
I'm still making the argument of why you think it's a limitation.
Because if we're going to tackle ADUs, why don't we say ADU is tied to single family homes? And so anywhere in the city where there's a single family home.
Let's go back to your discussion, and George, you can correct me if I misquote you, but if I remember the discussion, there was a lady worried about cars going down the side of her home by her master bedroom and somebody doing an ADU. I remember George, if I recall correctly, was concerned if you just broadly apply this to the citywide, you change the nature of a neighborhood. And so then we're back to, do we do it in Old Town? Do we do it the north side as a counterbalance to the density to the south side? And I think the transportation corridors is the first foray for people to see where it works, because they have an easy access to either hit a bus route and a walk route, or they have a quick access for a car to the collector road and out of the city, rather than a large amount of worried. I know people won't do it. I know you look at the data, but if you just broadcast it to the entire city, they're going to look at it as doubling the zoning across the entire city.
Mm-hmm.
So I would
agree. Do you see a distinction between ADU as far as detached? Do you see more of the concern with the detached ADUs versus basement ADUs, or do you see the concern and a reason to start small, and rather than citywide applying to both.
Well, I think that's a double question. The first one let's take is, do I see it a detached or attached? Well, that's a value judgment you make. I think ADUs are mostly unsuccessful being attached to the home. If you're looking at a millennial buying a home and wanting to be able to supplement their income, they're like everybody else. If they could buy a home and do a detached unit that on a small size, that would be good for them. I think of elderly folks, they may be able to sell their home to a friend or a younger child, build an ADU in the back, live in it till they need some other life choice. And then that's available for the new owner to rent out to another place. And I think the other struggle with keeping them in the home is, when do you say, I have this size basement, it's 1,500 square feet, but I'm only allowed to do an 800 square foot ADU. So I come in and get a permit for 800 square feet, but we later use the entire basement to live in and put the 16 teenagers with cars in the basement.
Well, so that's getting into the weeds and the ins and outs and the details of what we would do. But my simple question is, in your motivations or reasons to think that we should start smaller rather than bigger, were you thinking more of detached ADUs or both?
Both. Whatever.
Right. Brant, what were you going to say?
I was just going to add that support Corey in the idea of keeping it small. And we've got two items here. Is ADUs do come across as controversial to some. And so expanding it to the entire city might be challenging, and we might not get any ADUs at all. But if we keep it at the transportation corridors, it could be treated as a pilot, and overcoming some of those maybe unfounded concerns that some residents may have about the impact of ADUs to an area. Because we're talking about potentially more cars in an area, whether it's attached or detached, more traffic. But I think keeping it small, that's the first point. The second point is, we're going to have to add to this SB 34. So putting everything all in at once kind of limits us, because we incrementally have to add more to, what are we doing to support the demand for moderate income housing. So keeping it small just allows us to grow onto that. So that would be.
That's a really interesting point, and that leads to a question I have then. My understanding is that we don't necessarily need to add to it each year, but we just need to show that we're making progress in actually implementing the goals that we choose. Brant, if that were true, I would agree with you. Then let's start small so that we can show that we're adding more goals. But that's not my understanding of what the bill says. My understanding of the bill says is pick 3 goals and then show us that you are making progress implementing those goals.
You have to show progress, but also if you address that goal and you satisfy that goal, you've got to pick something else. You've got to continue to pick. You have to pick 3, and Lisa popped on, so I'm going to defer to Lisa for a moment here. When she pops on, I'm usually in trouble. So
no, I think it's a good question. The technicality of the ordinance of the statute, but I think actually that's the direction that the intent is that we're going to continue to work on these, and so. I guess when Corey and I presented some of the amendments to respond to SB 34, we started out with 3, I guess we suggested 3 to 6 options, but I do think as time goes by, the legislature will just continue to encourage cities to, work towards these goals.
And if we don't, it no longer will be an incentive. It'll be a carrot. It'll be a stick, and they'll start punishing us by removing the transportation funding like they've already threatened. So we've got to make progress towards them. And I think if we start small, it just gives us that opportunity to see how well it works. So if we bring it and introduce it citywide, my worry is that it would be shut down in a public hearing process, and then we don't have anything to show for it.
I have a question. If we start to talk about it, can't we still make it go citywide? If that's when we start talking about ADUs, if we decide we want to go citywide, we could still go bigger.
Absolutely.
I think the value in starting small, in engineering, you always prototype first. You can always go back and refine your next prototype and you move into your production. But it's really hard to roll back or change things if you've made a mistake once you've let it out of the bag. So it seems to me starting off small on the transportation corridor is fairly low risk for us. Potentially, I don't know, higher adoption due to the transit corridor. If anything, you get to test whether that's true or not. And I think that, Robin, it could easily be brought back after you've got some success in there, because I can easily foresee getting more people who want to do it at the same time you have residents saying, the scenarios that were brought up are happening and I don't like it. And what do I do as a resident? I didn't ask for this to happen next door to me just because somebody has a larger lot. And I think that's something we need to be considerate of.
Yeah, those are all legitimate arguments, and they, they'll put me in a different mindset for tonight, because I was uncomfortable enough with it that I was maybe not even going to be able to vote for this. But I take your points and can agree with those. The one thing that I'll say that we should keep in mind that gets a little bit tricky is one of the arguments for not doing ADUs earlier. We've already been talking about this for a lot of years, right? And one of the arguments for not doing it earlier is it was said, well, what about all the people who are already doing it illegally, right? And they're spread out throughout the whole city. And we know there's quite a lot of them. And we really have been pushing for this state level bill to make it so that we can fulfill this requirement, which is really, truly, the language in the requirement is not only to place an ADU ordinance, but to remove roadblocks so that it's not over-regulated. And so as long as we keep really moving forward, I mean, I understand the argument of starting with a pilot, but I also heard from all of us, the same council, that we want to be respectful to the people who are already using this and to try to give them a route to legality. So let's keep that in mind and keep moving it forward then.
Right, but their route to legality is based on building code at the state level. So whereas
right.
support this as a straight ADU given current building codes if it's detached,
Sure.
I think you've got less to work with and then trying to get those other folks compliant.
Sure.
I have a question for Lisa. Lisa, if I remember right, last year we had the same December 1st deadline to enact something to comply with Senate Bill 34. And so we come back around to that's what we have to go do again this year? I mean, Corey's done a very thorough job of explaining this. It's almost like feeling like we're having to do something even though we're not really sure what we want to do yet. Is that correct?
Yeah, SB 34 did include a requirement for cities to amend their transportation element. And Corey may know, but I don't think that one actually had the deadline that we had to do last year. So now we're coming back and fixing the transportation element. And then SB 34 also changed it. So there's two different things. Under the statute, we're required to review our general plan and our moderate income housing element every year, and then also send in a report to the state regarding what Councilmember Fillmore said is how are we, accomplishing those goals. And so it used to be every other year we would turn that in, and now we have to turn it in every year on December 1st. So this project or the review of your moderate income housing plan as part of your general plan, as well as the report that is sent to the state will be reviewed every year because that has to be turned in. The report has to be turned in by December 1st. And just since I'm on, I did go check the statute, and I think Councilwoman Fillmore is correct that the statute just says that the municipality shall, as part of our moderate income housing plan in our general plan, we shall include a recommendation to implement 3 or more of the 23 listed strategies. So it just says right now that we shall have a recommendation regarding 3. And then that annual report kind of says, hey, how are you accomplishing these goals? But I also agree with the city manager, 5 years from now, we need to come up with some additional goals. I suspect we're not going to stop at the 3.
So that's what we did a year ago. We did that to show that we're meeting 3 of those, 9 goals or criteria. And we need to do that again this year along with this moderate income transportation plan.
No, well, last year we made amendments to the general plan because specifically implementing the language of SB 34 saying, okay, these are the three that we pick, because the statute now says we have to pick three. And so that's what we did last year, was we amended our general plan to specifically pick three implementation strategies that we were going to work on in Centerville City. So we don't necessarily have to amend our general plan every year. It just happened that we amended the actual language regarding these strategies last year. And then SB 34 also required some general plan amendments regarding the transportation. But I think the statute does require the city, as part of that reporting, to review your moderate income housing element every year. So staff may review it next year and come back with some amendments, but not necessarily. But we do have to do the report every year.
Right. So what I'm doing with this is oversimplifying. I think we meet a lot of the intent of the transportation coordination for the most part, but it's pretty outdated. So an example from the meeting earlier is you need to adopt Wasatch, or consider Wasatch Front's Regional Council's long-range plan. Well, our code says any study done by that group is a part of our consideration. So we're covered, but are we really covered? And so I figured this year to kill two birds with one stone, do a little bit better coordinating our transportation with actual housing and show some accomplishment on our goals that we've set.
And again, I'll tell you that I'm able to understand the arguments you made about starting small so we have room to grow. But just so that you know where I'm coming from, I'm going to read goal E's exact language, which is the goal we chose by choosing working on ADUs. And that is create or allow for and reduce regulations related to accessory dwelling units in residential zones.
Yeah, and that's one of the findings that the Planning Commission said this helps with that finding.
Right, but do you understand what I'm saying about that goal being different than goal G, which is encourage higher density or moderate income residential development near major transit investment corridors?
Yeah, but we don't have a major transit investment corridor.
Right.
So we're not required or obligated to do that.
Right, but I'm just saying the way that I read goal E is residential zones, ADUs, try to make it more
and
applicable.
I don't disagree with it. I think the transportation says here's where we start. I'm still a little bit confused on why you think the transportation corridor goal handicaps the broader goal.
Because when I read this goal E, it says reduce regulations related to ADUs in residential zones.
Right, and this is saying as you do that, consider these corridors to allow it.
Yeah, but Tammy, I think you're splitting hairs though. Residential zones, we have multiple types of residential zones.
It's fine. I've already said I understand. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's fair to categorize this as one type. So I think it's good. I think you're saying is by reading that, I'm hearing what this is still compliant with that goal. It's just not.
And it's a starting point because right now we don't have an ADU ordinance at all. So I understand those arguments.
So this is a public hearing. Let's take it to a public hearing matter. We can come back and entertain a motion and further discussion. So let's go to a public hearing on general plan amendments transportation element. So the public hearing, Leah, if you'll put up on the screen, those are the public that may want to call in. Can you pull that back up again?
Are you not seeing that, Mayor?
I'm seeing it. I'm sorry.
Okay, no problem.
I have been using two screens while we've been doing Zoom, and tonight I just have one screen, and I find that I love those two screens that I had, so I'm going to have to set up to do that here as well. So public hearing matter, this is on the general plan amendments on the transportation element. The public, you see on the screen the way to contact, to call in, the dial, the meeting ID, and the passcode. I will look for hands being raised, as well as I'll being nudged by Leah if anybody might call that I miss, or any of the rest of you. So that public hearing is now open. Seeing no hands being raised or not being nudged of anybody else calling in, I will close the public hearing on that. And to see if any of the rest of you may have any comment or discussion on this before we have a motion on it.
I do just have one comment. I realize that it's not a new language, that it's actually in the plan. It concerns me that we say that we shall assure an adequate supply of housing for future population. Let's be realistic. Centerville is not big enough to assure an adequate supply of housing, no matter what. I mean, even if we were to, level people's houses and put in all high density, we cannot possibly assure housing. So
you're saying
that's something we might want to go back and look at carefully.
Yeah, you're saying it becomes problematic with the amount of building land we have left, right?
I do. And the unknown number of people who may want to live here. So that's a little bit naively optimistic.
I agree with that. I have another question, Corey. So what we're voting on tonight isn't saying that we agree or approve any of that. It's just saying that we'll look into it. Is that correct?
Yeah, it does. In my mind, it doesn't say that you've implemented anything. I mean, this is kind of what you're going to review later in the evening, right after this, is the moderate income housing report, and it's asking us, what's our timelines on things. This doesn't create a timeline or a final implementation. It's talking about, as you consider these other elements, consider doing these strategies.
It's just saying we're going to consider it.
Yeah, and there will be the others that look at it and say you're not putting enough teeth into your goal making. But I go back to Lisa and Tammy's argument. It just says we have to pick the goals. It doesn't mean we have to get them done. But just because we don't get them done doesn't excuse the future that they might say, well, you're not getting them done, so now we're going to make you get them done.
Yeah, and I think it's very likely that in a 3 to 5 year time frame, you're going to see that kind of an enhancement or a change in the language that 34 creates.
I anticipate it possibly too, but my soapbox that zoning for for moderate income housing doesn't work. You even heard the North Salt Lake say they've got a town center and they've got multifamily, and it didn't produce affordable housing. It produced more expensive housing.
Yeah, I've seen that all over. Obviously, that's a feature of low interest rates and people's desire to live here, for sure.
Yep.
So
this idea that the city's carrying and shouldering the burden from the development community to make sure moderate income housing gets built, and as soon as the development community and real estate community gets an opportunity, the market demand is expensive. It's not necessarily their fault either, but they'll build as many as they can sell, and they can sell them. I mean, there's 300 West, Salt Lake City, by the library, just off of Beck Street. New townhome units, Salt Lake City, dense, starting unit, $750,000. Salt Lake has got the most density and is not getting affordable housing, and that's why they've budgeted affordable housing money to spend.
Yeah. And just as a note on this conversation is, I think it also speaks to the livability and desirability for some of this kind of housing also.
Yeah.
So I think sometimes we're resistant to it because we say that makes our city less livable, but it really can make it be considered more livable.
So this particular ordinance, everybody got a comfort level where somebody's willing to make a motion?
I am. I'm willing to make the motion that we adopt ordinance 2020-14 transportation amendments.
We have a second?
I'll second that.
Got a second from, we got a motion by Councilman McHugh and a second by Councilman Ince. Further discussion on this ordinance?
I think we need to revisit the conversations that we've had with our legislators about the building code provisions. And nothing happened last year, to the best of my knowledge. And I don't think it was even discussed, to the best of my knowledge.
So we actually have Ray Ward, who's taking this on for our sake, and not Centerville's sake, but all the city's sake that are interested in seeing that kind of improvement. And the bill is being drafted right now. So there will actually be a numbered bill. It's already been discussed in the committee that will see it, and they seem to be looking on it favorably. And so the further discussion will be ways that we can lobby. Once the bill is in place, we can lobby for it. So yay for progress, because we've been talking about this for a long time.
Yeah.
And I think, Councilman Ince, in response to your question, this is something that came up in the meeting today, and I was thinking about it already with our particular senators. We have two and our representatives. We need to keep them informed of things that we are doing, you know, so when we do something like this, that we're making sure that the message gets to them of what we are doing, and all the cities in South Davis and Davis County should be doing that as well. Any further questions, Councilman Ince?
No.
If we don't have any further discussion, then let's do a vote on this. We have a motion and a second. Let's do a roll call vote, starting with Councilwoman Fillmore.
Aye.
Councilman Ince.
Aye.
Councilwoman Meekum.
Aye.
Councilwoman Ivy.
I'm still concerned about that assure word. I'm going to say nay based on that.
Okay, and Councilman McEwen.
I'm going to say aye. And on that assure, Stephanie, you know, it does drive density, but we got a long way to go. You know, just looking up the stat just to remind myself, you know, Hong Kong has 130,000 people per square kilometer. So we got a little bit of room. I'll fit a few more on the boat.
We're not even matching that with ants yet, are we?
I suspect we're matching it with ants.
Okay. So that motion passes, let's see, 4-1, right? That is duly noted. Okay, let's move on to item number 3. This is the 2020 Annual Moderate Income Housing Report. Corey, you're just enjoying entertaining us tonight, aren't you? Because this is you again.
Yeah, I get those little planning shows that I get to do for you until you're worn out of me, and then Brent kicks me out for a few weeks.
All right, take it away.
All right, so this is now our annual report. And I think there's a couple of numbers in the document that got transposed in opposite ways that I need to fix. So there's a couple of data errors in there. But let me be frank with you on the preparation of this. The state puts out a form that you report to help the cities. And this year I chose to just use that form. My second statement is that the Department of Workforce Services has done an excellent effort on trying to assist cities with data and numbers, but there's a lot of assumptions in those data and those numbers. And you know, I will take a little bit of credit towards Councilwoman Ivy's comment is, you know, shall assure the future. Well, we're going to have a growth in the city according to those data. But is it going to be a Volkswagen Bug that we fit in, or is it going to be, we have only a city so size and so big and so large, and we've got to balance it with all the land uses. So will we hit that growth marker in 2025? You know, I think that's the part of the lack of better terms, the shell game. It's moving and switching it all around. So I think Workforce Service did a great job to help cities comply, but that's all I used. I just focused on that data to give you a link to take you in there, give you a whole bunch of information, and then your job is try to reinterpret that information for the growth of the future. So some points to make. It's a little bit lengthy in the reporting form because now they want you to address the 3 goals. I chose not to address the other 4 goals because I think this was our effort to the main goals. And this whole purpose confession is to try to do something that lends itself towards Senate Bill 34 on transportation and helps us a little bit of a progress, as minor as it might be. And so I think as you read the report on our progress, we're probably not going to get an A+ grade on our progress because we're still in the really baby step effort as a city. And I think in some sense, justifiably so, to be in that baby step mode. What I do feel comfortable about is that not filling out this report makes you at risk for transportation fund. Whether you do a B+ or an A+ or a D- on your report is irrelevant that I see under the statute. So I feel comfortable of just keeping it simple and narrow, reporting on the 3 strategies. And again, the place that could be critical is that we don't attach timelines. And this reporting is trying to give you that social pressure. You know, do something each year, do a little bit more each year. And I think we took a baby step with your last motion. And so I think we get a good mark for that. We do have to call out, and this is where the data gets heavy and difficult. And it actually seems in the end fairly repetitive, but they give you 5 criteria. So you got to estimate the current rental housing needs for the following income limits. Workforce Services provides that to us. You have to update a 5-year affordable housing need. So you have to do a projection on your growth. And so I've created the projection. We have 6,874 more households. I'm not sure where they're all going in that VW, but that's what the data says. And so that would equal out in simple numbers, 897 new households projected. Their projection numbers show us moving from 3.2 persons per household to the 2.9, it's a 2.87, I think is what it is, person households. So that's the projection. They're heavy on the data information at a county level because that's where we measure to. We measure to the county, but we do get some Centerville data. And I just cross that over because the county assumption is if the county's 2.9, then maybe we'll be 2.9. Do I know that? No, I don't know that. We could be higher, but I'm just doing that at that county data level. I do split it up so that we kind of see a difference. Centerville's moderate income, 80% of moderate income is a little lower than countywide. That's a little surprising in their projection. They show a little bit of dip for us. So that could be interpreted that it may add a few households in the city to have some housing needs into the future. But that's the data. That's the data. Down here on the 2025 projected median income, this 24,000 is 22. That's where I think I flipped it in the typing when I did the calculations. So I need to fix that. But that gives you where we are on our top 3 goals and what our 2025 potential projection is. Where they're all going and how we're getting in there, I don't know, but it doesn't say how you're going to build all that housing. It just says keep that 5-year horizon in mind each year as you start planning your goals for moderate income housing. So unless you have questions, that's the report.
Thanks for doing it.
So that's the report, Corey, that we have a deadline of December 1st that we're going to submit, right?
Correct. This is the report for December 1st.
Well, I did have a question on the report, and now I don't have it open in front of me, but I seen where it said we didn't have any subsidized housing. And we do have 2 Davis County housing units in Centerville.
Right. It just didn't come up on their data set.
So I want credit for those.
Yeah, we can go back in and contact the county and add that in.
I thought when we talked about that, Robin, you said you knew of 2 in your neighborhood.
Right.
So are those the only 2 in town?
It's the only 2 in town. Yes.
Not to be nosy, but how did you validate that?
It's the Davis County Housing Authority. I know where they're located.
Right. And that's the only ones that Davis County Housing Authority has in Centerville.
But yeah, I can add those in. It won't change the calculation very much, but yeah, I can add those in.
The only ones they have are subsidized by Davis County. And I've talked to Davis County for other reasons and found out that those were the only 2 in Centerville.
That is correct.
So at one point in time, there was somebody thinking of buying that piece of property, and they were told that they would have to relocate them somewhere else in Centerville, and the cost would have been way too high, and there were no other ones in Centerville. I just want to go on record as saying I think this is a bunch of hogwash. I don't believe that density equals into affordability in any way, shape, or form. I called Legacy Crossing Apartments today. I called Park Legacy, which are both the ones on the other side of the freeway, and then Village on Main. And for a 2-bedroom at Legacy Crossing was $1,320 to $1,470. At Park Legacy, it was $1,302 to $1,362. Plus, they charge extra for a parking spot, and Legacy Crossing charges $110, which they require for internet and cable. Village on Main charges for parking, and they have something else they charge $55 to $60 for, and they were $1,150. And I happen to know of 4 homes here in Centerville that have 2 bedrooms that are all $1,000 or less, and they're single family homes. So they're more affordable than the high density apartments that we've built. So it frustrates me for the state to say you need to zone higher density, or for other people to say, well, you're discriminating against moderate income because you're not wanting to put density in, when actually density has absolutely no correlation. Just like Corey said, you can build very dense condos and they can go for $750,000, which certainly is not moderate income. So I think the state is out on a limb somewhere. I don't know why, thinking that by forcing people to put in density, I think it's just a ploy for developers and realtors to make their money. So there's
Robin, there's just the growth numbers that we are experiencing and that we know we will continue to experience. And so it's just a matter of number of housing units.
No, it's also moderate income housing.
Well, I do understand that, but I'm just saying the math, it's a supply demand issue. And the math is, if we just don't even have the number of housing units that matches the population, then prices, even rental prices for 1-bedroom apartments, are going to just continue to skyrocket. Right. And so it's just a matter of finding where we can add to the housing stock. We can't control the private pricing market, but are we going to, as all of cities along the Wasatch Front, take responsibility to do what we can to add housing units?
But Corey's telling you that Salt Lake City has added the most and has the highest density and does not have moderate income. So It isn't going to bring any type of moderate income. It might bring more housing to Centerville, but is that what the people of Centerville want? Because if it's not, then maybe that housing is going to have to, there have been other towns, other places that are being opened up, because we're not going to be able to take everybody that wants to live here in Centerville anyway. And, you know, I want to see development. I'm excited to see new homes going up in North Centerville to, you know, give people that want to come to Centerville a better advantage. But I just don't believe with them pushing density, because that's what they're telling us is density brings them more affordable housing. And it's a proven fact that it doesn't.
You know, Robin, I think some of the arguments that have been made on where people live is changing. I mean, that's one of the things that the pandemic has definitely crystallized in the minds of a lot of legislators, in the idea that there are certain industries, not all of them, where they don't need to reside, where they don't need to live along the Wasatch Front. In fact, there's been a big movement at the state of Utah to encourage people to move off the Wasatch Front and to telecommute where possible. But that still leaves you with service industries. It leaves you with, you know, your police, your fire, individuals who are not necessarily going to have the same level of income to start, you know, a starter home in Centerville at $450,000 on up is not going to be affordable for. You know, I have a friend whose son is he's a licensed paramedic. He makes $17 an hour. You can't afford that kind of property for $17 an hour. So I think that the notion that it's going to create affordable housing is based on density, I agree with you. I don't think that that's been proven true, but we still have that obligation. If we're going to have people who work and service our community, we got to try and figure out how to allow them to live in that community too. I mean, that is tough. But
it is tough because all of our police officers will tell you that they can't afford to live in Centerville.
Right.
I think we have two that can't afford to live in Centerville, but there's not anything that I can do. I could build up, you know, 200 new apartments, but it wouldn't help them live in Centerville because, you know, there are vacancies down in these ones that I called, and, you know, they're not in their price range. So I just am a little frustrated that I feel like they're trying to tell us density is going to help that, and I don't believe density is the answer. I don't know what the answer is because we do need affordable housing, but I just don't think density is going to give it to us.
Well, Robin, and that's your question there. That's why you look at various options, and you referred to some options of rental of homes, ADUs, another option. I mean,
Right.
you have a lot of different options to meet those various needs.
I just wanted to get on my soapbox for a minute. I'm okay now.
It's a good soapbox, Robin. I mean, one of the problems we suffer from as a state right now is because our economy is strong. We've got an influx of people who are cashing out of higher real estate places and coming to live in Utah, and it's driving up the market everywhere. I mean, my daughter can't afford to buy a home, and she makes really good money. So I think it's a struggle for them, for the next generation. Getting on the property ladder is getting next to impossible in Utah, and that's unfortunate.
I do think also, though, that the pandemic has changed. Some of the younger generation was going more into the condos and stuff. And now with the pandemic and having to stay at home, they're wishing that they had a little backyard to go out into. So it may change what people are wanting. I mean, this was something we never seen coming. And I think it could change what is wanted by the people now because they are wanting a little bit of space. And, you know, if it's not even safe to go to the park, it's really nice to have a little bit of space that you can go out in. So
we'll have to ask Brad how hot the Ephraim Richfield markets are, because, you know, people are fleeing and going down there, and properties are coming, you know, properties that are affordable are disappearing even in those areas.
Mm-hmm. And then you can have your self-driving car drive you to work.
Yeah. The pricing is definitely much more affordable down south, and you do have a lot of people moving there. But as an elder millennial, I will state that I would still rather have no yard that I have to take care of and go to the park down the street. Just FYI. but I lost that argument to my.
That's not what you have.
But I lose the argument to my young Generation X wife who wants a house and a yard. So.
Well, now we know we have an elder millennial we can call on when we need that opinion. I didn't know we had an elder millennial.
I just learned that term this weekend at a conference.
Thanks, Corey. This isn't one we don't have any vote on this. He was just informing us of this. So
yeah, if you're okay, I will just fix some of the data points so they're
Why are
correct.
you up again?
And then send it into the state.
So
Sorry.
Corey, I have a question. On the page, section 2, where you summarize the housing units, how about line 10 is mobile homes?
Oh, this is the state data?
No, it's our data.
Right, it's generated by the state.
Oh, so you don't correct it, huh?
I don't have the ability to correct it. That's their, you go to
Because
their
the 62
website, you type in Centerville City and it fills in all the blanks.
Well, the 62 mobile homes are going away.
Yeah. But technically, as of reporting date, they're still there, even though we know they're going.
We're going to take credit for them for one more year.
So, Councilman answered.
No, I did. It's further evidence of Robin's complaint about it. It's hogwash. Doesn't mean anything. Tammy's right. I mean, the growth is there, and many people tell us that the growth is more internal than import. I don't know that I believe it, but the growth is there, and where we're going to put them, who knows?
So if it's okay with the council, I will correct it. We will run it back by the mayor since he is listed on as part of the representative. Make sure that the mayor's okay, that it didn't change too much, and then we can send it on to the state if you're okay.
Yeah, I agree.
Thank you.
Everybody okay with that option?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Corey, I want to thank you for your pushback and challenge, helping us think these through. I always do appreciate the fact that you're willing to challenge the assumptions that we make as a council, even if you're wrong.
I'm okay being wrong. The question is do I assist in any manner or form without offending too bad?
Well, thank you, Corey, so much. I guess you might be done for the night unless you want to stay and listen in, right? So we will move on. Let's move on to item number 4. This is a public hearing on a fiscal year 2021 budget amendment. Jake, are you here with us?
I am. I'm here.
You want to go over it?
Yeah. Okay. So last month we received our sales tax revenue. And again, like the other prior months, it was more than we had budgeted for. In fact, it was almost 119,000 more than we had budgeted. So it's good news. We have more. And so we met with each of the directors and kind of collaborated and came up with a consensus of some things that we can add back into the budget. And that's what we have here as the amendment. We also received the third tranche of our CARES Act money. So we need to amend the budget to account for that as well. And just to go over it briefly here, you'll see here there's an increase in the sales tax. All we needed to do was 72,562, not the full amount of the 118,000 with what was chosen to put back into the budget. And there are some related administrative fees that are associated with it that would take out of the enterprise fund. Sorry about that. And then also the increase in revenue for the CARES Act money. In fact, Leah, can I share my screen so I can show the public what we're talking about, what we're looking at here? Okay, it looks like I can. Okay, can you all see that? All right, so you can see the adjustments to the revenue on the top on this chart here. So now down below, what was decided was to add back some money for training, mainly because we have a lot of new employees. So this is going to help cover some of those costs, like in police, public works.
Jake, could you go one zoom bigger on that? That's not showing too well.
Kind of small. How's that?
That's much better.
Better.
Better? Okay. All right. So you can see on there, the very first thing there is the related expense. The CRF is the official acronym we're using for the CARES Act expenses. So you can see that increase there for the tranche, the third tranche. And then you can see there's a series of education and training. That was the consensus of each of the departments, mainly because we have some new employees coming on in police and in streets, as well as our new recorder. So we need some more funds there for training, for education and training. The police vehicles, we all know how long it takes to get those. So that was added back in here so that hopefully we can get it by the end of this fiscal year. And that's the remaining one. So they requested 2 last year. So this will fund the last one of the 2. And then the other things were kind of productivity related things, as well as the buildings, the maintenance and repair. Our buildings, you all know that the city hall as well as the public works facilities are aging. And so we really needed to get that money back up to cover some of those costs for making repairs to those buildings. And then the productivity ones, we got the Smoot Park irrigation filter, which is due to be replaced. We don't need to defer that. The iron worker, that's related to having the additional street employee and being able to do some more work here in our shop rather than farming it out. So it makes things much more efficient, as well as you'll see some of the repairs like the welding bay and the pressure washer. So that's really all that there is here. So the net increase for sales tax would be that $72,000 that I was mentioning. So not a whole lot there. Is there any questions?
If I can just add to what you said, Jacob. So one of the ideas moving forward with not the CARES Act, the excess sales tax revenue that goes beyond what we had originally budgeted, is right now we're not spending the entire amount and our idea is actually not to come back in December, but actually allow that to reserve to build up a little bit more and come back to you as a council on January with whatever reserve has been built up, whatever excess revenue has been built up to that point, and then present our recommendations to you at that time. At this time, with winter falling upon us, there's not a lot of items we really need at this point. So we thought it'd be good just to delay and get a better idea of what our real needs are for the remainder of the fiscal year. So this is not spending the entire amount of the sales tax revenue. And then if we see another excess amount, then we'll keep account of that. And then in January, we'll present exactly where we are with the sales tax revenue, our expenses, and maybe with some plan on how to proceed for the rest of the fiscal year. Anything else to that, Jacob?
No, that about covers it all.
Thanks, Jake. Anybody have any questions on those budget amendments? All right, let's look for a motion. And sorry, it's a public hearing. That's right, public hearing. So this, we will go to the public hearing portion of the fiscal year 2021 budget amendments with which Jake Smith just described. So that if you'll put that back up on the screen again, Leah, for the public, those that may want to chime in, and we will open the public hearing. There it is, if there's any public out there that wants to call in. The public hearing is open for the fiscal year 2021 budget amendments. I'm not seeing any hands be raised, and I'm not getting any nudges that anybody wants to respond. So I will close the public hearing and we will come back to if there's any further questions of Jake. If not, do I have a motion?
I would make a motion that we approve the revised budget as presented.
A second?
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. Let's do a roll call vote. Councilwoman Meekum,
Aye.
Councilwoman Ivy,
Aye.
Councilman McEwen,
Aye.
Councilman Ince,
Aye.
and Councilwoman Fillmore.
Aye.
That motion passes 5-0. Thank you, Jake, for your time and that you put in
Thank
on
you,
that.
Council Mayor.
And Jacob, did you go, I'm sorry, I might have missed it. Did you talk about the uniform in more detail?
Oh yeah, I missed that one. So in there is uniform that's in the elected officials budget. So mayor and a few of you have been asking for uniforms. So now we got the money to do it. All right.
We're gonna get you hoodies, a lot of swag, whatever you want to put Centerville on,
Yeah.
tumblers. I'm just kidding. No, but we will be looking for shirts. So when we do attend conferences, or one day if we can attend conferences, we'll have a Centerville City shirt. So anyway, we'll be finalizing what that style might be with our local vendor here to purchase those.
So this is a running joke in a way with Jake and I. One time a Clearfield worker brought me a Clearfield shirt. So I showed Jake, hey, I got my shirt. But I do think outside of the Jake and I having a lot of fun over it the last little bit is that when we do go to conferences and conventions, it is nice to represent your city for a relatively small amount of investment. So thanks for telling us about that, Jake.
Yep, no problem.
All right, let's go to item number 5. This is minutes review and acceptance. The October 20 work session minutes and the October 20 city council minutes. Any changes to those minutes?
Motion to accept the minutes as recorded.
We have a motion. We have a second.
I'll second it.
All in favor, aye.
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 Opposed? All right, great. Let's go to our city council report. This time it's council member Ince's turn. Anything to report?
The tree board has started trying to meet again. I have not been able to make the meeting. I don't have a lot on that. On October 10, the Centerville Community Corps did a point of distribution exercise, emergency exercise. Point of distribution refers to us being able to distribute literally anything that might be needed in terms of an emergency to residents. Could be water, it could be some foodstuffs, it could be medical supplies. We particularly did our exercise with a flu shot clinic. It was done cooperatively with the 4 commercial providers within the city. We coordinated a number of people going to sites. It's interesting. There was in early October a shortage of over 65 flu shots, which are apparently a different strength. I didn't even really realize there was such a thing. So only one of the 5 providers in town, us being one of the providers, had those over 65 shots available on October 10, and that was Target. It went well. We had about 30 people involved in the exercise, coordinating it. We did about 450 total shots between everyone involved in the 4-hour exercise. Learn some things. We have a list of things that if and when we have to do this more for real, we'll know that we have to do. That's about it.
Bill, we always appreciate your efforts on that. That is such a critical part.
I was going to
Thank
say
you.
thank you for all the extra time you put in.
What's that, Councilwoman?
I was just going to thank Bill for all the extra time he put in putting that together.
Yes, for sure, definitely.
We have some good people who try very hard, so, and take it seriously.
And on the tree board stuff, I'd kind of been put, some residents, I think, after the windstorm were wondering what are some good trees to plant for high winds. And so tree board had put a list together, and I was hoping we got that out there for the public to see on our website or somewhere. But so I don't know if you.
I'll follow up on that. I am not sure that it's out.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much for those emergency needs that we have. Mayor's report is next. Briefly at the start of this meeting, and when we met last on October 20th, it had not been announced yet, but as I mentioned at the first of the meeting, that Chief Jeff Bassett announced his retirement on October 21st. And it was effective as, it is effective as of November 12th. So right now there's an interim chief, Dane Stone, who has been one of the assistant chiefs along with Dave Powers. And the board, which is made, or the fire commissioners, whatever you want to call them, which is made up of the 5 mayors of the district and also one of the county commissioners, will be looking to determine who becomes the permanent fire chief. Chief Bassett has loved his service to the board. He gave a very passionate speech of how much he loved it. He just was ready to have a different experience, and the being on call 24/7 and his family growing. He just had some opportunities that would maybe allow him to have some more reasonable hours. So that was a big thing. And he's been in 7.5 years. And so he's only 50 years old, and everybody thought it would go a bit longer, but he and his wife felt the time was right now. So that's a little bit more on that. The second thing is,
Can I interrupt, Mayor?
You may.
Is there any kind of a reception or going away or something for the chief, or are we COVIDed out?
You know, that is a great question, because that has not been talked about at all. And I would imagine that they have something going on, but maybe I'll get a hold of the chief or that and see what they're trying to do internally, or I'll get a hold of Mayor Lewis, who is the chair of the board. Because yes, we definitely need to do something for sure. Second thing is, I want to take the chance right now to introduce you. Helping Leah tonight is Janet Dennison. She is going to, she's being trained by Leah tonight. I think Brent mentioned that. And she is going to be our new city recorder. And this is kind of her baptism where she's starting tonight. Janet, do you have anything you want to say to us?
Hello.
Welcome. We're so excited to have you.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Since our pictures are on the screen, can we ask to see the new recorder?
This is Leah. I would turn it on, except for the laptop we have doesn't have a camera on it.
She can run to my office real quick if she wants.
Oh, yeah, there you go. Want to run to Brent's office? No.
I don't know that it's absolutely necessary, but at least like to know who I'm meeting in the hall.
Don't forget your mask if you run into Brent's office.
I'm gonna take the laptop into Janet's office. No, we won't do that.
So while they're trying to get us a video, we interviewed the candidates on Zoom a week ago, Tuesday. Is that when it was, Robin? Janet was a very qualified candidate. And then yesterday, as I was walking into the city, she was coming with some paperwork to bring in, and I was able to meet her in person with her husband. And we had a nice, pleasant talk out front for a few minutes. So it was nice to meet her in person as well. So
we're very excited to get her.
What's that, Robin?
We're very excited to get her, and I think she's very qualified.
So I don't know if they're going to give us a picture, but anyway, she's on her first duties tonight. So,
well, welcome.
I'll vouch for her. She lives by me.
And
I was not on the committee, so I kept my mouth closed that I knew her. So.
Yes.
So she's actually a Centerville resident?
She is a Centerville resident.
Happy New Year. And
grew up here, I believe, as well. I knew her parents, so.
Yep. So along those same lines, because Leah's turning the reins over, then this is Leah's, as you know, for 3-4 weeks now, she's been helping us on an at-need basis and doing probably more than at need. And so once again, we're grateful for her, and this will be her last active service tonight. So
thank you, Leah.
Thanks, guys. It's been great working with you.
Been fun to get to know you. Good luck in your new endeavors.
Thank you.
Then just a couple other quick things. I continue to work with some of the players with the mobile home park residents getting resituated. About half of them have already moved. About half are left to remove. We had a Zoom meeting with church leaders and county officials and the buyer the other night on the progress and what help may be needed there. And so there's been some additional help that's come to the table that we hope that they can all find a place and be moved properly, especially with those that are in deep need, the widows and the people that are disabled and that type of thing. So, and then the last thing is 2 weeks ago, I sent you, just under 2 weeks ago, resume for a new planning commissioner, Heidi Shagrud. And I don't know if you guys had a chance to see it. I didn't get responses back, but I sent it back out again today. So I guess I'm looking for an approval of that appointment.
A motion that we give advice and consent for the planning commissioner as the mayor has named her.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. And that's it, other than a little sidebar on housing. This isn't housing, but I had a meeting on a board that I serve at Utah State accounting board, and the head of the accounting department said the people that are struggling the most with this online stuff is the 18-year-old freshmen, that they're having a real difficult time. And then one of the partners at one of the national CPA firms downtown said the older people are having a more easy time doing these Zoom meetings than their new young people. So I guess we can pat ourselves on the back that we're adopting the technology in like some cases better than the young people are.
That's interesting.
It's because they're swiping left and it's still the same meeting when they do that.
What's that, George?
I said it's because they keep swiping left and they're still stuck in the same classroom.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I thought that was a pretty good source coming from the accounting head at Utah State, and then one of the partners, one of the national accounting firms. So we're all kind of amazed on the board because most of the board is more wiser or older. So Anyway, that's all I have unless you guys have any questions for me. All right, if not, we'll go to the city manager's report. Brant?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. You do have a number of items, mostly informative. The first item was apparently my wife really misses me because she's watching on YouTube, and she told me, but your kids need a yard. So I was reminded that I have a yard because I have kids. And then I replied back, no, we have you have a yard to keep the kids occupied. So anyway, but yeah.
Careful, Brant, you're going to get yourself in trouble.
I'm already in trouble. I'm in deep.
How long do you need this meeting to go now, Brant? You're now in trouble.
Can I sleep on one of your couches? No, I love my wife. I love my wife dearly. The cemetery, we had discussed the cemetery earlier in the meeting. That is an item that we are researching, per Councilmember McEwen's thought of discussing the ballot initiative and engaging possibly Lewis Young or their Lions to assist with the ballot and what that would look like as a geo bond. I think that would be really informative as we proceed and determine if we want to stay in the cemetery business, or I should say we're going to stay in it forever and always because we have a cemetery, but expanding our cemetery business. But in terms of also, as I mentioned to a couple of you in the past, if we do eliminate the need to try and reclaim any spots, then that allows us to allow every gravesite to be an upright. My concern, as we've seen from Mr. Sheriff this morning, was I feel if we expand the cemetery another 80 spaces, we're going to have 80 requests to have an upright, and we'll be having this conversation more and more. And I see some challenges with that. We'll talk about that in a future item. Don't know if you know a couple of items. Lieutenant Zan Robinson will be retiring. I don't know if everybody here knows that as of February. So Chief and I will be having those interviews, I believe, next week to discuss an internal promotion from one of the sergeants. So they're preparing their work. So it'll be really exciting to see the sergeants and where that goes. So Chief and I will be working on that. And we've requested assistance from Chief Ross and Bountiful with those interviews as well. And then also, you may not know, Cheryl has officially provided, given her notice of retiring in February as well. So we're losing Cheryl as well. Tana has expressed interest in that position. So we're looking at, we have an internal promotion, so to say, with Tana, and we'll have some opportunity to train and have an opportunity, some overlap between Cheryl and Tana. And that's part of the training budget and why we need that increase, because Cassell training and all those other trainings are quite expensive. So we're looking at moving that. So we're going to lose Cheryl as well, and that's going to be really tough. She knows quite a bit. And then what else do I have? COVID, CARES Act funding. It has come down, and I've talked about this before, but I want to include in a future agenda item the spending of the CARES Act funding. You saw what we have in the tranches and how much we have to spend, and I do want to have one final meeting. We're getting down to crunch time where we either need to spend it or give it back to the state. We do have some proposals we would like to propose to you as the council on what to do with the final remaining amount of the CARES Act funding, and then we can go from there. So, what is our cutoff for that? Oh, Jacob, is it December 1st, or was that Utah County that had December 1st cutoff? It's
encumbered by December 30th.
Needs to be encumbered by December 30th.
Calendar year encumbrance.
So yes, we need to encumber it by then. We've done the calculations, and if using it for public safety, which I think is still a great viable use, and we'll present all of that to you at a future agenda item. More than likely, it'll be a work session discussion.
I was actually going to suggest that might be very appropriate.
Yeah, it's very informal, just trying to get some guidance on how we spend that. Let you know where we are, Jacob, letting you know what we've spent to this point or have encumbered, what we have left in our proposal for that remaining amount. Now that we have the hard numbers of what the state withheld 11% of the last tranche to devote or share with the communities that were potentially hit harder than others. I spoke to one of those communities, and I hate to say, but they actually didn't need the money, but anyway, losing 11%, that's quite a bit. You know, we received more than I originally thought they were going to share with the city on that third tranche. And then finally, I do want to take the time and thank Leah. Leah's been incredible. She's definitely going to be missed here. She has done so much to really get that, you know, redefine the city recorder position and get that prepared for Janet and whoever's to follow. She's improved the department, but I'm really going to miss her. We've worked closely for a long time, but I'm grateful for her, but also excited for Janet. I spent the day with Janet. She's hilarious. Her personality will fit in well with us, I think. But she did not grow up here. She grew up in New Hampshire, but her parents retired here. They chose to retire here in Centerville. And so that's pretty neat. And so I got to learn a lot about Janet today. I think we're really lucky to have Janet. One of the challenges is going to be is we use different terminology. She worked in local government back east, and today we found out a couple of things we say differently. Learned a little bit more. What's that?
Changing our names. What are we going to be announced to the city councilman? We're going to be
Selectmen.
Selectman. Doesn't that sound much more important? I told her when we interviewed her, I want to be a selectman.
Well, since we already have the elder millennial, why not?
Right. Nobody else in town would know who you were talking about, Robin.
That must be good.
But no, Janet's great. She's a lot of fun. She's very knowledgeable. She's ready to get to work. And I know that I have sufficiently overwhelmed her today. But it was great getting to know her. And when you get a moment, we'll introduce you and COVID friendly in a situation. But also final thing I want to talk about, I almost forgot, is with all the recent increases in cases, Chief and I will be meeting tomorrow or Friday to discuss possibly moving back to level 4, and the mayor and I haven't even talked about that, but we need to include the mayor as well. We've been operating level 3, but there is potentially a need to separate some of our employees. We have 3 employees quarantined, no outbreaks in the city. I don't want to violate any HIPAA, but there are definitely concerns of an outbreak, and we need to make sure our clumps are separated. Employees in public works are no longer, aren't working in close proximity. We have some projects. I spoke to Mike Carlson. We have some water meters that need to be installed, which easily can be done by one person. So we have projects to keep our employees hopefully as isolated as possible. So there is a strong concern from me. Mayor and I will also talk about, that level 4, since it does involve the mayor as well. So
gotta avoid one of those Main Street water line breaks again, right?
Yeah, that really concerns me as well. I mean, all of them working in close proximity, and it's definitely a worrisome. Hopefully everything's frozen over and we won't have another one. Anyway, great. Any questions for me? All right. Thank you very much.
Are you going to comment on the fiasco Saturday at City Hall?
I would prefer not to comment in a public meeting. There's some complications to it that involves outside of City Hall that it would be addressed, but it's in regards to another entity that needs to be discussed with, because based on having conversations with 3 employees, it's a little bit more complicated and a little bit more frustrating.
Okay.
So do we want to go to a closed meeting?
We could. We do have a closed meeting, and Leah could create that link, and we can go into closed session if you'd like.
If you don't think it's necessary at this point, I'd just like to know that you've taken steps so that it won't happen again.
Yes. Well, I mean, you saw from the mayor's email that steps were, again, just getting clarity to staff on what is not allowed at City Hall, but also conversations are to be had with outside agencies in regards to City Hall property as well. Is that as clear as mud as I can be? Okay.
I thought we were having a closed meeting anywhere. Is that just our regular piece?
That was, no, it was one item regarding personal character and competency of an individual, but that needs to be delayed till the next meeting because there's steps that I'm taking in regards to that as well. That'll be much more.
Okay, so this is the same issue delayed Twice. Okay, gotcha. Okay, just want to make sure it's the same one.
Yep, not forgotten. It's just moving, and I want to make sure it's a complete report when I come back to you.
Great, thank you, Brent. Well, I guess we'll look then for, unless there's anything else, a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thanks, everyone. Be healthy, be safe, be happy. See ya.
And have a good
Night.
Good night.
Mhm.